My name is Casey Weitzman, and I'm president and founder of Gender Wellness of Los Angeles.
Can you tell me a little bit about your own mental health journey?
Sure, how far back do you want me to go?
Please, whatever you would like.
My own mental health journey. Well, as a young queer person, um, coming out in the 70s, I guess, I'm aging myself. Um, I knew there was something different about me, but I didn't quite know what it was because we back then did not have computers or cell phones. So I really thought that I was different and worried about it because I didn't know another gay person. I obviously the transgender and non-binary, that was a whole many years down the line, but I realized pretty early that I was different and I didn't know what to do about it. And so I went in the closet for a very long time, hoping that it would pass, let's say. And my parents were not supportive. Um, I didn't really have any friends that I could tell. And even when I went to college in Santa Barbara. Um, it was so small that I just knew it wasn't safe to come out in college. And so, I didn't really start to come out till I graduated at 22 and tried to start getting mental health services. But even back then, I'm not going to say the first therapist tried to convert me back to being straight, but it definitely wasn't something where I felt like I was going to be supported. So obviously, I did go into deep despair and depression, um, you know, for a long time. And then I started off in the entertainment business, and 5 years after doing that, I realized that I wanted to help other people that were feeling kind of similar to how I was. So that's when I went to therapy school. But even then, I really didn't feel embraced at all. It was kind of a rough um, start for me because there weren't the kind of resources that there are today. And that's why I'm glad we're talking, because even though there's so much darkness there's so much darkness around being trans or um, queer. But at least I feel like more people are coming out and there are still more providers now. Because when I started, I kind of fell into this, working with transgender people, but I just knew that I wanted to offer something that I wasn't able to get as a young adult. And so I kind of have dedicated the last 35 years of my life. I used to say it was to normalize being trans, but obviously right now, I feel like we're going back decades. So, but like I said, I started with nothing. And so I try and even assure people that, yeah, it's pretty terrible, but we're going to figure out a way to get you the services that you need. And like I said, I've dedicated my life to marginalized, groups of people. And when I first started, I feel so honored that people would come to me because I wasn't out to clients. But I just, I think they began to trust me even though I wasn't trans either. Um, because most people back then would lose their job, always lost their family and their kids. And so things have changed for the better, although, I never imagined we would go this far back in my lifetime.
And you said that sometimes you felt alone. So, how important is it for someone to have a positive support system to be around?
It's crucial. And sometimes, because certainly I didn't have it, and my brother also is gay. And so, really, the only support I could get would be I kind of feel like, even back then with bookstores, there would be maybe a couple magazines, or if you actually went to the library and had to ask a librarian where books on queerness, it was almost like taboo, like you were asking for porn. It was just really not accessible. And so um, I just wanted to make sure that for young people now, that we could, find resources and support. So I always tell the parents, even if you don't believe your kid is trans, just listen to them and affirm them, even if you don't believe what they're saying is true.
And with all your experience and work, how did that all become organization?
It's interesting. When I started in the late 80s, we kind of had to wing it because the people that were coming to see me, I didn't know where to send them because insurance covered nothing because it wasn't even talked about. So I was able to do it. I trained under a group of clinicians that they were really the only game in town in Los Angeles. So think about that. So I kind of trained with them and then I went out on my own because back then to find a hormone doctor even was almost impossible. So there's one physician here, and he and I have been doing the work for the same amount of time. And he's in his 70s, and now I'm in my 60s. And we kind of started it where I could find, I was just knocking on doors, like, who can help us here? And even back then, there was so much shame around it. I couldn't even pass out a business card that said I worked with trans and non binary. It was kind of like I handed out two cards. But I was able to find this one doctor and I found one surgeon. And that was kind of it for a long time until I started probing and seeing who would provide this care. And slowly throughout the years, I have been able to find really great resources. But it's taken me 20 years to put that together. And now there are so many more providers that want to do it. But I think it's on the job training. I don't think it's something because I didn't get any training. It's just like, can you sit across the room for this person and, you know, feel comfortable and helpful? And, I got licensed at 31. So I was very ambitious. And, my first job in the industry was working for a gay and lesbian foster care agency. So I was already on the front lines because I trained all my gay parents. Um, because back then, obviously, the Department of Children and Family Services would make assumptions that gay men would molest these children. So my challenge was to train them well and just to remind people that if the parents were doing something wrong, I would know first and do whatever action needed to be taken. But, we kind of had to train other people or other clinics and facilities that we don't want to harm the children, we want to help raise them. And so that's where I actually met my first gender queer person, let's say, while I had that job, because my supervisor misdiagnosed this client because the client was born female. And the client said to me, I love women, but I'm not a woman. And I'm like, okay, I know nothing about this. So it was sort of like the blind leading the blind. But in fact, we went through the transition together. And this individual absolutely changed my life. And he will say that I changed his life because I was able to help him and he was able to help me understand more what it's like to be, not just gay, but being transgender. So that was, back in the late 80s. And I just found this group of people to be the most authentic and vulnerable group of people that I've ever met. And obviously, I do understand what depression and anxiety is because I've been through it. And So I feel like I can sit in a room with a client and parents and, just be as authentic as I can. And really wanting to understand not only the child, but I've learned through the years that you've got to get the parents on board. But it has been a struggle. And as I was thinking of retiring, I realized I can't because our services are needed more now than ever because of some of the funding. We don't take funding. And then I have a team of providers from all different ranges of fees and then ethnicities. And I'm trying to grow the company where I have more transgender and non-binary therapists on board. But it's been a very exciting journey. And really, my career really started to take off almost exactly 10 years ago when Caitlyn Jenner came out. That's kind of when it became like I don't know if you remember, it was like a water cooler topic,
Right.
regardless of how you felt about Caitlyn. Her transitioning kind of in the public eye got people to start talking about it. And although she's not a good representation of the community, in fact, she could have been much more helpful. It started more people started coming to me to start to question their gender identity and their sexual orientation. So that's when it really took off. So I feel like we're there again. But there's just so much religious, so much of this is around religion rather than, understanding what these kids are going through.
Have you seen your clients and their parents' confidence level rise as they go through the process?
We were really there until this year.
Hmm.
Because obviously in the Biden administration and even Obama kind of came around, but this idea that the words were being used politically and that there was support and a lot of funding. And so it was really exciting because just here in California, there's Children's Hospital, but there's also major universities and companies that have a whole staff of providers that have give gender affirming care, and I'm so excited because I didn't know if that was ever going to happen. So we were really, and the parents would say things which I think is so funny now. The parents said they never saw it coming, and then the parents would say, if my kid's just gay, that's fine. I was like, well, that is a lot of progress, right? Because being gay when I was growing up was like taboo. So I say to the parents, well, that's nice. I'm glad, but we're only talking about their gender identity. We haven't even touched their sexual orientation yet. But parents have been more open in the last, 5 to 8 years than ever in my career. And they really, even if they don't believe it, I've taught them to really, I always say, don't panic and just affirm the child. Even if you don't believe it, you come tell me how much you never saw it coming. You're not going to support it. But as far as the child, you cannot take those words back. You can't, if you said you're never going to transition, you have to wait till you're 21. I mean, those are detrimental answers to some of these questions. And so, obviously, we're fairly lucky in California. In other parts of the country, it is so much worse than it is here right now. And that's why we're trying to get licensed in other states. Like I'm licensed in Idaho and Florida. And I finally got my first case from Florida where they can't get their hormones unless they drive 2 hours. So that's what's happening. People in all these other places are either banned completely, which I worry, that's going to have very negative consequences. Or, the parents are resilient and they'll find ways to get the services for their kids. But it is an upward battle right now because of us being so marginalized and so picked on. But I don't think it's around the gender affirming care. It's just they don't want trans and non binary people to exist at all. And that's what they're trying to do, right? There's only two sexes.
Yeah.
And so I've watched depression, and I know kids are going to die and get, really, dire, knowing that they can't get these services at all right now. And to make a child wait till they're 19 to start on a blocker or a hormone, I mean, you can't take away cis males. I mean, if they go through puberty, you can't take it away, So, that's why I don't understand why they want people to wait, because then it's just about surgeries and, whatever passing means to the person. For many of them, they'll never pass completely. And so we really work on resilience and safety and support systems, to kind of help them feel like they're not alone. And we run groups, and we do a little podcast too, just to try and help people kind of see, the positives, even in this kind of, political culture.
Well, with podcasts, I'm a big fan of them. But what is it like getting your message to a larger audience?
Well, it's interesting because, obviously I see clients privately, my staff sees people, but things like this, when I'm on other people's podcasts, are obviously probably going to have a larger audience than mine. So I really just, I think being more of an elder now, which I never thought I'd get here, I have a lot of knowledge. And so I want to help more people than just my clients, because, there's a lot of providers that say they do this work, but they don't really. And then the whole conversion therapy seems like it's going to come back, where they're going to try and send these kids off and make them straight or make them stay in the gender that they were born in. So it's always just about trying to make it not so dire. That's kind of a motto. The company is really around, we are unerasable. So no matter what happens, we are not going anywhere. So I show up everywhere to try and get the message out, that, we're here to help you. And if we can't help you, we'll provide you. We have a wonderful resource page. And even with resources, I won't recommend a provider unless I've either met them myself or my team has, because I always want to make sure that if any client goes to a provider, that they're going to use their correct name and ask what the pronouns are. Because I think that's what suffers a lot in medical care, that providers are not educated in working with queer and transgender. So they'll misgender and not think it's a big deal, but for the client or the patient, it's huge if you can just even ask what their preferred name and pronouns are.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
I go to therapy. I always feel like if you're going to be a therapist, you always have to work on yourself first. And, that's hard sometimes because I don't take enough time off. So part of it is burnout and, surrounding myself with loving, supportive, people in my life. And then, I have to make sure that I exercise and eat well and sleep well. But it's pretty, when I can, for the first time in my life, I have to say to my clients, I don't know when it's going to get better. This is the first time in my life I can't say, oh, we'll get through this. I just have to say we've got to be more resilient and don't isolate. And, that's where there's more cutting and alcohol and drugs right now. And it's just really for me to have community, because this is also a time in my career that I feel like I can lean in any group of people, where what I have to say is as important as what other people. I always felt like people thought I was weird, because why would I do, even my folks wondered, why would you want to choose to do this work? And it's like, I can't imagine doing anything else. So I had to fight to help my family understand and people around me um, understand the work that I do because it's been so misunderstood. And, I always tell people no one wants to be transgender. No one. This is not easy. They know it's not easy. By the time someone tells me or their family, they've known for a while and they've thought about it and they know that's going to be a tough road for them, even if the parents are accepting, because what about grandparents and aunts and uncles? And, it's very challenging. And, I have parents now that are concerned and are thinking about moving their families out of this country so they could get better care and not feel so discriminated against. Um, so it's disheartening, and that's why I can't retire right now. I feel like we're back 30 years ago, and before I move on, I just want to make sure that we grow and I can get the word out that, it's not even in the diagnostic, it's like homosexuality. It's not in the DSM. It is not a mental illness.
Yeah.
It's more of a condition that needs to be, I don't want to say fixed, but that it's honored. And that's been really hard. And it's funny, sometimes my parents will be more excited about the transition than the kid. The kid might say, Mom and Dad, I just want to let you know I'm queer or I'm trans. And the parents are, all right, let's get started. And the kid's like, I'm not ready. And it's so, that's why I tell parents, it's not like, these stories that you go to school as Tommy and you come back the next day as Susan. It's like, it's a very in-depth, and that's why I want people to understand that you just don't go through transition. It's a medical, it's a very long process, if you do it right. And so, that's what we try and provide, because you have to, like I said, you have to be resilient, but it's like, what are you going to do if you get bullied or read? So I always work on the depression and anxiety first. I have to make sure the child or adult is stable before we even do hormones, because if you're not, healthy before you start this, it's not a promise that, doing hormones or blockers are going to help. But I do know from 35 years of experience that if you put a young person on a blocker, just which stalls your puberty, or even hormones, it can be so life-changing. And I do understand that people do detransition, but if the therapist, you can't prevent it completely, but I can't say that I know many people in my practice that detransitioned. I think people are scared now. I know that some of my clients that were afraid to come out at work, or some of them are going back in the closet. And if you travel, every one of my transgender clients are getting TSA to, they're alerted. And so I'm really teaching people that travel how to be with TSA if you feel like you're being disrespected. Things you can do to, as far as like, if you're a trans female, that you can require that if you're going to be patted down, it's by a woman, and that you can be in a private room. Because I kind of feel like where people have got more carte blanche to be disrespectful and harass, the community, which I think is so unfair. But
Yeah, what would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
you're not alone. That's why, therapy is important, but more than that, group therapy can be important. Just going to kind of like anything, like in Los Angeles, there's like queer gyms, there's lots of support groups. It's just to know that you're not alone, and that there are so many allies. That's the other thing I want to say. There are more allies now than ever in my career that are like, well, this isn't my issue, but my love and compassion for this community is so high. And for example, my assistant, never worked in this community, is straight, and but yet that passion is inside her, and so many people that do this work, that it's like it's like exciting, and if we can be helpful, and even if the child is suicidal or is coming out of a hospital setting for suicide, it's just like there is a road, a more positive road, because a lot of the schools have been better at not allowing these young people to be discriminated. I don't know what's going to happen now, but if you can have parental support, you're way ahead of the game. And even having one friend, and they don't have to be queer or trans, but just that understands you. And luckily, there's so much good and bad social media, but there are a lot of shows now on cable that work right with this community, showing very positive representation. And I think Jazz Jennings, which you probably know, was a great start of a young person, where it was filmed throughout her whole transition. So there can be happy stories. So I always say we have to stay positive, even though there's all this darkness.
Yeah.
But it's just really about teaching about resilience, coping, how to work on the distress and dysphoria. Anything around community. What I find so interesting is so many of my young people come out usually over video games.
Oh, really?
The parents would come to me and say, can you get my kid off video games? And the more I started learning about the kids, it's like there's so much I could learn from them explaining to me the games they play, single shooter, or, I didn't play video games, but, sometimes their avatar or whatever would be in the gender that they wanted to be. And it was the first time, and they could come up with a name. So I'm always very curious about their gaming and then their social media. And I caution young people that not everything you read is true. You've got to take it with a grain of salt, and, just try and get accurate, questions or answers. And that's why I feel like companies like, Gender Wellness of LA and others, the center, we have the largest gay and lesbian center in the country here in Los Angeles. And I know they're going to lose funding, but they've been so awesome with providing HIV care, PrEP, and then all the gender affirming care. Same with Planned Parenthood. We really have some great people supporting us, Human Rights Campaign, so it's really like understanding that there are a lot of people that are trying to defend us now, where we didn't have it before.
And you said you can't retire yet. So where do you want to see your mission in the next few years?
Continuing to provide gender affirming care. Hopefully write a book, so that, I want to do things like this where I can talk to people where the audience is larger, because I'm only one provider and I'm only one company. But I love talking to people, and I love talking to the kids and the adults and schools and temples and churches, and let them know that we're here, and also provide all the other resources there are in the cities or across the nation, like the Trevor Project. If anyone is suicidal, right, that they can call the Trevor Project, or, and the other part is finding good providers, finding providers that really have had some training in working with queer and non-binary and transgender folks, through Psychology Today or some of these other places. And they can always call us if they can't afford our services. We have a lot of other resources where, they can get the help that they need. So the reason why I can't retire is because there's not many elders left that started when I did. And so if I can train other practitioners or other agencies about how to work with this population, because even when I was putting kids in group homes or higher level of care, a lot of times even rooming, where are you going to put the transgender client? And for the longest time, it was based on their birth, or their genitals, and not like where they felt most comfortable. And most treatment centers now are much more careful to really listen to the child. And if it's not a good placement, then we'll place someone somewhere else where they will be affirmed and supported, and that the staff will be trained. So the more that this happens, then the more I feel like, I don't know if I'll ever retire. I think I'll always have a passion for this, but I may not do direct services forever. And that's why I want to train as many clinicians as I can of how to, do this care for us. So I'm not going anywhere. We're here. We're unerasable. And I just want to help more people than just my company, And that's why I'm so excited that you reached out. And I don't know if I've answered everything or if you have any questions, but I love doing these kinds of things, although they make me nervous.
Yes. I used to be behind the camera. Now being in front is like, oh, geez.
Yeah, it's a different experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can people reach out and learn more?
Well, they can reach out to our website, which is Genwell, GenWell, .org, or just look up Gender Wellness of Los Angeles. Obviously we're here in Los Angeles, but like I said, if you call us, even from other states, I'm hoping that we could help you and help you with resources. And I have a terrific staff and warm, and so that's how you can find us. And we have a great webpage like genwell.org where they can get a lot of information and listen to our podcast and just be out there in the community and not just talk the talk but walk the walk. So we're always out there at festivals and things, just trying to educate people and what we do and how we're here to help.